I never imagined my world would shatter at age 32, but life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. Looking back, I should have seen the signs, but when you trust someone completely, you tend to overlook things that seem obvious in hindsight. My story began during my college years at Eastern State University. I met my fiancée in the campus library where we were both studying for finals. She was struggling with calculus, and I offered to help since math had always been my strong suit. We clicked instantly, and I found myself looking forward to our study sessions more than anything else. What made things even better was that we discovered we lived just a short drive from each other back home. During breaks, we'd carpool together, and those 3-hour drives became some of my favorite memories. She'd play her favorite indie rock songs, and I'd share stories about growing up in my small town. Our families got along great from the start. My parents welcomed her like a daughter they never had, and her family treated me like one of their own. My mother would invite her for Sunday dinners, and my father seemed particularly invested in making her feel part of the family. At the time, I thought it was just him being supportive. After graduation, I landed a job at a tech firm near our hometown, and she found work at a marketing agency in the same city. Everything fell into place naturally. We moved in together, adopted a cat, and started building our life. 3 years later, I proposed during a hiking trip to her favorite mountain trail. She said yes before I could even finish asking. Life seemed perfect until last month. I was at work when I realized I'd forgotten some important files for an afternoon presentation. I hadn't told my fiancée I'd be coming home during lunch. It didn't seem necessary since she was usually watching her favorite cooking shows on her day off. When I pulled into our apartment complex, I noticed my father's gray sedan parked in the visitor's spot. This wasn't unusual since he often dropped by to help with wedding planning or just to chat. But something felt different this time. Maybe it was the way his car was parked haphazardly, or maybe it was just instinct. I used my key to open our apartment door quietly, thinking I'd surprise them both. Instead, I was the one who got surprised. There were clothes scattered from the entrance to our bedroom. I heard voices coming from there, and my mind refused to process what was happening. I stood frozen, my work files completely forgotten. What happened next felt like a scene from a bad movie. I took out my phone and started recording, not out of some calculated plan, but pure instinct. I picked up the clothes from the floor and threw them into the hallway. Then I walked to our bedroom, still recording. The door was slightly open, and what I saw through that gap destroyed my world in an instant. My father and my fiancée were together in our bed. I hit the lights, and they both jumped at the sudden brightness. The look of shock on their faces would have been almost comical if it wasn't so devastating. My father tried to grab my phone, but I reacted on pure adrenaline and struck him. He hit his head on the doorframe and slumped to the ground. I looked at my fiancée and said something about her being more concerned about him than explaining herself to me. Then I told them both that if they were still there when I got back from work, I'd send the video to everyone we knew. I left, somehow drove back to work, and managed to get through my presentation despite my hand throbbing and my world crumbling around me. Later that evening, my boss noticed blood on my collar and asked what happened. I showed her the video, and she sat in stunned silence. She offered me time off, but I couldn't bear the thought of being alone with my thoughts. Work was the only thing keeping me somewhat sane at that point. When I got back to my empty apartment that night, everything felt foreign. The couch where we used to watch movies, the kitchen where we cooked together, our bedroom, it all felt tainted. I couldn't sleep in that bed again. I spent the night on the couch, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what happened. The next day, I decided to tell my mother. She needed to know the truth before any twisted version reached her. I tried calling multiple times, but she wasn't picking up. Finally, I drove to their house, rehearsing in my head how to tell your mother that her husband is sleeping with your fiancé. I wasn't prepared for what happened next. As soon as I pulled up, my mother stormed out the house, screaming at me. Apparently, my father had taken my fiancé to their house and spun a completely different story. He told my mother that I had gotten into a fight with my fiancé, and when he tried to intervene, I attacked him. My mother called me an abuser and said my fiancé was right to stay away from me. Something in me snapped. I told her the truth and sent her the video right there. The look on her face as she watched it, I'll never forget it. She couldn't even finish watching the whole thing. I wanted to comfort her, but after everything she'd said to me, I couldn't. I got in my car and left her standing there in tears. Back at my apartment, I started packing up everything that reminded me of my fiancé or my family. I boxed up all her things and put them by the door. I couldn't legally kick her out since she'd been living there, but I made sure she'd know she wasn't welcome anymore. Everything related to my parents went into storage. Years of family photos, birthday cards, Christmas presents, all packed away like they never existed. I texted my fiancé's parents about calling off the engagement and briefly explained why. They had always been good to me, and telling them was another painful blow. I asked if they could come get their daughter's things. I didn't want to see her again. The next few weeks were a blur. I found myself going through the motions at work, avoiding concerned looks from colleagues. My boss kept trying to check on me, but I couldn't bring myself to talk about it. How do you explain to someone that your entire life has been destroyed by the two people you trusted most? I started looking for a new place to live, somewhere far from all the memories. My friend Qley, a realtor, helped me find a small house on the outskirts of town. It needed work, but that seemed perfect. I needed something to keep my hands and mind busy. The 45-minute commute to work was worth the peace it offered. I got tested for STDs, thankfully all clear, and started seeing a therapist. Dr. Rivera became my lifeline in those dark weeks. She helped me understand that it was okay to feel lost, angry, and betrayed all at once. During our sessions, I could finally let down the mask I wore at work and with friends. Qley was the only one who knew where I lived now. I changed my phone number and blocked everyone else. My phone had been constantly buzzing with messages from my fiancé, my parents, and concerned friends, but I couldn't deal with any of it. The thought of talking about what happened made me physically sick. The renovation work on my new house became my therapy outside of therapy. I stripped walls, replaced flooring, and rebuilt cabinets. Every swing of the hammer felt like releasing a bit of anger. Every fresh coat of paint covered another painful memory. I hired professionals for the electrical and plumbing work, but everything else I did myself, learning from YouTube videos and making plenty of mistakes along the way. After 3 months of isolation, Dr. Rivera convinced me to start reconnecting with friends. I started small, meeting Qley for coffee, then gradually rejoining our Friday night game sessions with other friends. They didn't push me to talk, and I appreciated that. Sometimes just sitting with people who cared about me was enough. Then came the day I decided to talk to my mother. It had been 4 months since everything happened. I unblocked her number and called. She answered immediately, her voice shaking. We agreed to meet at Joey's Diner near her house, neutral ground. When I walked in, she was already there, looking older than I remembered. She broke down as soon as she saw me, apologizing over and over. She told me she'd thrown my father out the same day she saw the video. They were getting divorced. Part of me felt guilty for breaking up their 30-year marriage, but Dr. Rivera had helped me understand that I wasn't responsible for other people's choices. We talked for about an hour. She told me how she'd kicked both my father and my fiancé out of the house that day, too disgusted to look at either of them. I told her how her words had hurt me, how I needed my mother during the darkest time of my life but couldn't turn to her because of what she'd said. I explained that while I was willing to work on our relationship, it would take time and would happen on my terms. Just as I was about to leave, she stopped me. Her face went pale as she told me there was something else I needed to know. My fiancée was pregnant. She'd come to my mother's house looking for me, saying she didn't know if the baby was mine or my father's. That news hit me like a truck. Just when I thought I was starting to heal, just when I was beginning to feel somewhat normal again, this bombshell dropped. All the progress I'd made in therapy, all the peace I'd found in my new home, felt threatened by this new reality. Now I'm sitting on my back porch, watching the sunset and writing this down. The renovation work is almost done, just one room left to paint. My therapist says I've made good progress, and I guess she's right. I can go whole days now without feeling angry or betrayed. I've started enjoying things again, my job, my friends, my new hobby of woodworking. But this pregnancy news has thrown everything into chaos again. Part of me wants to know if the baby is mine, but another part wants to stay far away from that whole situation. I don't know what I'll do if it is my child. How do you co-parent with someone who betrayed you so completely? And if it's my father's child, that's a whole other level of complicated I'm not sure I'm ready to face. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. The house is almost finished, my job is going well, and I have my friends back in my life. My relationship with my mother is slowly healing. It's not the life I planned, but maybe that's okay. Sometimes the life you end up with is better than the one you thought you wanted. At least that's what I'm trying to believe. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.